But after I got sick, I just decided I was going to throw myself into volunteering and started volunteering with the Schizophrenia Society of Alberta and CMHA as well, both of those here in Edmonton. And I basically started from square one. It was pretty difficult, pretty daunting, and I think that there's hope. When I was first diagnosed back in '92, the level of hope really wasn't there. I mean, the medications were there, but today, with the advent of all these new treatments, new talk therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy and the new injectables, the new tablets, the new medications, the new genetic studies that are going on leading to possible cures or even maybe preventions in adolescence. There's a level of hope that we didn't have even 10 years ago. I think that there's hope. There's hope for mental illness. There's hope for the parents of the mentally ill. Maybe there won't be a cure for quite a long time, but if you adhere to the medication, if you adhere to talk therapy, if you try to keep your weight under control, I've actually lost quite a bit of weight since I was in St. Catharines. I've actually lost 85 pounds. If I can do it, anyone can do it. Just there's hope. I guess asked everywhere I speak as to why I have done so well in life in spite of this scary illness. I believe it is due to the love and support of my family and due to me never going off my medication. I have been blessed to live in a time and a place where there is medication to treat my condition, if not entirely cure my illness. In the beginning, though, on the old medications, I was stuck in a sedated haze. When the first atypicals came on the market a few years after my diagnosis, I was able to partially awaken from the cloud of the illness. I remember the week that I was put on risperidol, I went to the library and tried looking up books that I hadn't been able to look up, my own books that were in the library collection, and I was able to find them immediately within 5 minutes, even though for years I hadn't been able to figure out how to find them in the stacks. And that was the first realization that something was going on with the risperidol. 9 years ago, I was placed on a new type of injectable sustained release drug during a research trial. It allowed me to return to almost a normal frame of mind. I went from sleeping 14 hours a day to 7. That means I'm awake 40 hours more a week. If I live another 20 years, this will have given me an extra 1,700 days of real life. That's a gift of life I hope I can make good on.
Many people have harmed me in my life, and I remember them all. But the memories grow pale and faint in comparison with the people who've helped me. The fellow survivors, the fellow voice hearers, the comrades and collaborators. The mother who never gave up on me, who knew that one day I would come back to her and was willing to wait for me for as long as it took. The doctor who only worked with me for a brief time, but who reinforced his belief that recovery was not only possible, but inevitable. And during a devastating period of relapse, told my terrified family, "Don't give up hope. I believe that Eleanor can get through this. Sometimes, it snows as late as May, but summer always comes eventually." 14 minutes is not enough time to fully credit those good and generous people who fought with me and for me and who waited to welcome me back from that agonized, lonely place. But together, they forged a blend of courage, creativity, integrity, and an unshakable belief that my shattered self could become healed and whole. I used to say that these people saved me, but what I now know is they did something even more important in that they empowered me to save myself.
I remember going, crossing the threshold. They wheeled me up in a wheelchair to the ward at the University of Alberta Hospital for psychiatry, and I started screaming uncontrollably when I saw the sign and passed through the threshold, and they probably thought I was having a psychotic break, but actually it was the one lucid moment I had, because I realized what this meant, because I knew what it meant. A lot of people don't realize the full implications, but I saw my mother since the age of 5 and what it did to our family life and what it did to her life to be sick with schizophrenia. So I thought, oh my God, it's going to happen to me. Whenever I talk to you about stigma and how it can damage us, I tell a story of something that happened in Edmonton almost 20 years ago now. A young man with a history of violence and drug use pounded on his brother's house late one night. The man had his younger brother arrested and the next morning went out of town for the day. While he was gone, his younger brother was released from jail without telling the police telling anybody. He got in a taxi to his older brother's house. When arriving, he beat the taxi driver to unconsciousness, broke into his brother's house, and violently killed his sister-in-law. When the police responded to the taxi driver's attack, this troubled young man walked up to the police car and got into the back seat. The family was very vocal about the need for changes to the justice system so that victims could be informed when their attackers were released from jail. They lobbied for extra treatment beds for drug addicts and harsher treatments for drug dealers. Buried deep in the reports, very deep, was that this young man had schizophrenia and had used street drugs for years to self-medicate. No one in his immediate family ever mentioned this, that this young man had a mental illness. When he came to trial, his attorney never admitted any evidence in court about his illness. In fact, he put on no defense at all and called 0 witnesses. He went off quietly to jail as a dangerous offender for the rest of his life. His older brother ran for public office on a platform of getting tough on criminals. It was easier on this family to believe that their brother's son, nephew, was a violent drug addict than to publicly acknowledge that their family, somebody from their family, was ill and needed treatment. It was easier on this young man to accept punishment for a crime he committed during a psychotic episode than to admit he had the illness of schizophrenia. This is the face of stigma, that it's easier to admit your sibling is a crazed killer than to admit they have this illness, schizophrenia, that I say so often. When I met my future wife, I was afraid to tell her at first that I was ill. When I finally broke down and did so, she said, "That's interesting, so what?" Sadly, not everyone can do that. When someone is first diagnosed with schizophrenia, often their best support is their family. That doesn't mean you won't face stigma at the hands of your family or friends. My wife's family was so upset of her marrying me that her mother told everyone in her family to boycott it. She actually received wedding announcements back from her brother, returned to sender. She didn't receive a single wedding present from her family. In my own family, I faced a different kind of stigma. I faced embarrassment. There are members of my family that become angry when I appear in the paper or give public speeches. They waver between wanting me completely sedated so as to make all my decisions for me and hide me in the basement, to wanting me to work a full-time job in the suburbs like normal people, and let alone the idea of volunteering as a professor. I think the strangest brush I had with stigma was when I first started introducing my wife to my friends and family. Almost everybody asked her if she had schizophrenia. She got used to parroting, "No, I don't have schizophrenia," that when we went to dinner with one of my sisters for the first time, she blurted out, when my sister went to ask her something completely unrelated, "No, I don't have schizophrenia." The funniest thing is that those who didn't ask just assumed, and months later, she said somebody even asked her a month ago if she had schizophrenia. And we've been married since 2006. And months later, they were shocked to find out my wife didn't have a mental illness like mine. Even 6 years later, some people still thought she had schizophrenia and is just hiding it, even 20 years later. If I was deaf or blind, nobody would ask my wife on first meeting if she was blind or deaf unless she was blind or deaf. For those of us with schizophrenia, people just automatically assume that we are so damaged that a normal person wouldn't want to marry us. I believe that for a long time. So you see, stigma takes many guises and rears its head when we are least expecting it. So how do we fight it? By education, education, and more education. So I was afraid when I was getting married to Canada that I'd walk up, trip, throw up on her shoes, ruin her shoes, and then somebody from behind the tapestries, they have tapestries there, will jump out and taser me. Anyways, the Governor General starts approaching me, and she had her gaggle of the guys with the clear earpieces. They're like literally standing eagle-eye looking at the grannies who are getting the Order of Canada as being, well, they had a real one, a schizophrenic who's 6'5", who towers over her. If I fell on her, I'd crush her. So they all went to attention as soon as she came closer to me. And the closer, I didn't notice this at the time. I would have been mortified. I would have probably frozen up or said something wrong. I thought everything was okay because she was okay. I was just focused on her and she seemed friendly enough. But they actually were afraid of me. They gave me the highest award in the country and they're still afraid of me. They should be afraid of my wife because she might sue them. She's a lawyer.
Even with all that, excellent treatment, wonderful family and friends, supportive work environment, I did not make my illness public until relatively late in life. And that's because the stigma against mental illness is so powerful that I didn't feel safe with people knowing. That said, I don't wish to be seen as regretting the life I could have had if I'd not been mentally ill, nor am I asking anyone for their pity. What I rather wish to say is that the humanity we all share is more important than the mental illness we may not. What those of us who suffer with mental illness want is what everybody wants. In the words of Sigmund Freud, to work and to love.
In 1969, when my mother was first diagnosed, my dad developed a cardiac event and a condition that he was told he had 5 years to live. And he lived until 2016. So he obeyed the doctors, which is where my story goes to, of my obedience of that profession, difficult as it may have been. And he survived. So, the doctors sometimes can get it right.
On to one of the reasons why I believe that I've done so well is because I've adhered to the medication regime. But the reason I've adhered is because I had a reason. As an advocate and as a writer, I had a purpose to get up in the morning. A lot of people with schizophrenia and mental illness lose that hope, lose that meaning in their lives. You have to find some purpose for yourself. You have to find some meaning for yourself so that you stay on the meds, so that you keep on going, so that even though you're living in a rundown part of town or you're living in substandard housing, you still have a purpose, your life still has meaning and is a real blessing.
It was armed with this knowledge that ultimately I would gather together my shattered self, each fragment represented by a different voice, gradually withdraw from all my medication and return to psychiatry. Only this time from the other side. 10 years after the voice first came, I finally graduated, this time with the highest degree in psychology the university had ever given, and 1 year later, the highest master's, which I always say isn't bad for a mad woman. I worked in mental health services, I spoke at conferences, I published book chapters and academic articles, and I argued, and continue to do so, the relevance of the following concept, that an important question in psychiatry shouldn't be what's wrong with you, but rather, what's happened to you towards myself. And I remember the most moving and extraordinary moment when supporting another young woman who was terrorized by her voices and becoming fully aware for the very first time that I no longer felt that way myself, but was finally able to help someone else who was.
As a young woman, I was in a psychiatric hospital on 3 different occasions for lengthy periods. My doctors diagnosed me with chronic schizophrenia and gave me a prognosis of, quote, grave. That is, at best, I was expected to live in abortion care and work at menial jobs. Fortunately, I did not actually enact that grave prognosis. Instead, I'm a chaired professor of law, psychology, and psychiatry at the USC Gould School of Law. I have many close friends, and I have a beloved husband, Will, who's here with us today.
As I stand before you, I am reminded of the continuing importance of hope and resilience. Although little can be accomplished with hope alone, when accompanied with resilience, hope can guide one's ability to recover from a disability, to defy expectations and maintain a productive life after a mental diagnosis. As you venture forth into the world, never forget the power that lies within you to effect change. When I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, it would have been easy to succumb to despair, to retreat into the shadows and abandon my dreams. But instead, I chose to be resilient, hope for a better future, confront my illness head-on, and become a voice amongst the many voices in my head for those of you who suffer in silence. As you enter this new chapter in your lives, I urge you to hold on to hope. Let it be your guiding light in times of darkness, your source of strength in moments of weakness. For it is a hope that will sustain you through the uncertainty that lies ahead, and we live in uncertain times, kid you not. It is hope that will embolden you to chase your dreams. And it is hope that will ultimately lead you to the fulfillment of your goals. In closing, I want to leave you with a quote from Mary Angelou. Hope and fear cannot occupy the same space. Invite one to stay. As you navigate the uncertainties of the future, may you always choose hope over fear, courage over complacency, resilience over resignation.